My boyfriend is going to propose to me soon, but I'm rethinking our entire relationship because he constantly accuses me of cheating and being unfaithful when all I've ever done is try my best to love him. Posted by you/Pookie the dog. Sorry in advance for the wall of text. I, 25F, and my boyfriend, George, 28M, have been together for a long time now. He's going to propose to me this summer after I graduate. I went back to college for a second degree. We're planning our wedding and honeymoon, designing our future house, and we talk about the child we want to have someday. I think it's pretty safe to say things are serious between us, and we're deeply in love. However, things have not been so easy for us in the past. Our combined anxiety has caused a lot of grief. I'm still struggling with being abandoned and left to fend for myself as a child, and he's struggling with deep fears from past abuse by his father, brother, and ex-wife, who were all mentally and physically abusive. Understand that George is so sweet and loving. He does his best to help me and encourage me in any way he can, and it's clear to me that he wants me to succeed and be happy. But with George, it's like a Jekyll-Hyde thing. Sometimes I can't even believe my wonderful boyfriend could swap so quickly. When he asked for a prenup, I understood. His ex stole everything he owned and left him homeless for months. When he gets nervous and withdrawn in response to my stress, I get it. His dad was abusive whenever something stressful happened. And maybe it's just my own anxiety, but things are starting to get precarious for me. About once every 2 weeks he asks me if I'm cheating. His ex cheated on him multiple times. Sometimes he just randomly asks, "Are you cheating?" And I've been patient because I understand how anxiety can be. I make sure to always show him who I'm texting and Snapchatting, and I let him answer my texts when he hears the tone and see my call logs. Other times it gets more serious. Some months ago, he announced that he knew I was cheating because he found, in the trash, a carry-out bag and the remnants of a dinner for two from a restaurant he'd never been to. I pointed out that it was from the week prior when I'd gone to a cafe to meet my sister, and I let the leftovers go bad and just threw them out. But it was only after I showed him an Instagram picture of the meal and a pic of me and my sister from the same place that he believed me. Another time, he said he knew, he used that word, I was cheating because he saw a picture on Meet Me of me in my underwear in somebody else's house. I asked him to show me the picture, and he said it had already been deleted and admitted it was just from the shoulders down. I invited him to look at every piece of underwear that I owned to see if it looked familiar. He admitted, after searching, that the woman had been wearing a black bra, and he remembered I don't own one of those because I like white shirts and they always show underneath. After he remembered, he calmed down. This last time was the most serious of all. I've been stressed due to midterms this past week, and I've been nonstop studying in the library. I always study in the same place, by a window in the library, and he's come along and brought me food and helped me study. When I'm stressed, I can get pretty withdrawn, especially when I've got a lot to do. I noticed he was getting more and more nervous about it, which culminated, I thought, in my accidentally spilling water off my nightstand and swearing up a storm. I said over and over again that it had nothing to do with him, nothing was directed at him, he wasn't even in the room at the time, but he accused me of taking out my stress on him. After that, he was extremely withdrawn and moody. The next day I was boxing things up to send back home to my parents, and I heard music suddenly blaring from the kitchen and found George in there cooking dinner, which is something we always do together. I was in a good mood and tried to join him, but he didn't let me. He kept saying that I needed to stop being rude to him. I had apologized for every wrong he cited against me, but he maintained that he was just tired of my behavior and, in my mind, it felt like he was deliberately holding on to those past wrongs. This eventually led to a pretty huge fight, where I shouted at him that he was making my life hell right now on top of all my other stress, and he called me a CNT and a stupid bitch. I responded by calling him a childish jerk. He ran out the door to go buy cigarettes down the block, and I left too, and headed back to the library. I stayed there until 2 a.m., studying. When I got home, the first thing I noticed was that the front window was shattered. This scared the hell out of me. George has thrown things and broken things before, never at me, never my stuff, so I was afraid of what kind of mood he was in. I went inside and he was still awake, waiting for me. I didn't say anything to him, it was very late, I was tired, and I had an exam in the morning, so I took a shower to help me sleep, changed into my PJs, and prepared a bed on the couch because I didn't want to be near him. As I was settling in, he walked in and demanded to know why there's something white on my underwear. I couldn't even believe what I was hearing. He showed me my underwear, and it was so ridiculous, because he knew I'd been dealing with a yeast infection these past few days, which causes white discharge and requires whitish medication. The stuff on my underwear was so obviously not what he thought it was, but he absolutely believed it was. So we fought. I brought up the yeast infection and he seemed to realize that I was right because he immediately abandoned that argument and switched to how I'd been disrespecting him this past week, and he wouldn't stand for it anymore. I asked how I'd been disrespecting him. He brought up how I didn't walk him out of the library the times he'd joined me there. I pointed out that he always needs to leave before I'm done studying, so I want to stay and keep studying, and I think that's reasonable. He said I was ungrateful for his bringing me food and flashcards in the library. I said that I do remember thanking him, and he finally admitted that he was grasping at straws but that he did feel disrespected. I said that it was his anxiety, and I asked him to please realize that. I tried to remind him that we're best friends and we love each other, and I would never do anything to try and hurt him, but he snidely told me to go talk to my therapist about it. He doesn't believe in therapy. He wouldn't stop yelling until I hid under the covers, plugged my ears, and started crying. Then he shouted that I'm not a victim and finally left me alone, but my anxiety kept me up all night, and I ended up failing one of my tests the next day because I was so tired and my eyes were so grainy from crying. By the next afternoon, we were back on speaking terms. He admitted that he knew there wasn't white bodily fluids from another man on my underwear, because he drove by the library a few times and saw me studying there in the window where I always study. I felt very nervous about this because I realized that even with definitive proof, with his own eyes, that I didn't do anything wrong, he still went ahead and accused me. Recently we watched Horns together, and I mentioned that I thought it was unrealistic how the best friend became a psychopath out of nowhere. I thought, given they'd known him his whole life, there would have been some signs that indicated he was crazy, and his friends would have had a hunch. George said he wasn't surprised. He said he believed anyone could snap and become a rapist/murderer out of nowhere, and people could hide their true intentions no matter how well you think you know them. He cited the time his sister-in-law, married to his abusive brother, tried to strangle him out of nowhere. I know he's very distrustful of everyone, so I understand why he said that, but still, it made me afraid. The last few days have been so difficult for me. I already feel very sick to my stomach with nerves. I brought up what he said about Horns and kind of half-jokingly asked if he was going to kill me. He said no, but that he does sometimes imagine punching me in the face. I told him I sometimes think of punching him too, but I would never actually do that, and he should never do that either because I will leave. He just laughed and said he wouldn't, and I thought the conversation was over, except he suddenly said, "If you cheated on me, I think I'd be angry enough to try and kill you, and probably succeed." I responded by saying I would probably be angry enough to kill him if he cheated, but I wouldn't actually hurt him. He didn't really have a response to that. Yesterday he said it again. I mentioned how one of my friends and her now husband went celibate for their entire engagement period, 1 year. He casually responded, "That sounds horrible. I think if I had to go more than 2 weeks without sex, I'd probably freak out and kill you." This made my stomach do a flip-flop because it was the second time in 2 days. I said something like, "You know I won't be able to have sex for 6 weeks after I give birth, right? Even if it's cesarean, because I need to recover from surgery." He didn't say anything, and that freaked me the F out, so I pressed him, "You know that, right?" And he said, "Well, it's gonna be tough. Things are spiraling out of control for me. I know I often don't think straight because of my GAD, but I'm not happy with how things are going. I want to tell him not to accuse me of cheating anymore, that I've more than proven myself to him, and that we can't fight like this anymore. He needs to stop saying anything about killing me because, even if he's joking, it makes me sick to my stomach. But now I'm a little afraid that if I pick a fight about this, he's going to think that I'm cheating and trying to cover it up somehow. Further, I'm worried that if I can't account for every minute we're apart, like cameras following me everywhere, then one day, if my phone dies, or if I get stuck in traffic, or if some male co-worker greets me inappropriately against my will, George will believe I'm cheating, and possibly kill me? /relevant comments. Commenter. I read this sub religiously and have for many years. This is probably the scariest thing I've read. This dude is going to kill you. I'm not kidding, you seriously need to get out of this relationship and get far, far, far away from this man. He is horrifying. Commenter 2. 1. He's convinced she's already cheating. 2. He has clearly stated he is willing to kill her for cheating. 3. He breaks things when he's angry. Put 1 and 2 together, up, and leave him before he breaks you. Your intuition is ringing right now, and you should definitely listen to it. Women's intuition is very useful in abusive relationships, and you should always listen to it if you have a bad feeling about someone. Look up how to leave an abusive relationship, because this is the most dangerous time, when he is most likely to try to kill you. He will be convinced you are leaving him for someone else, and he's willing to kill you over that, so you need to be prepared. I would suggest going to the police station and filing a report that your boyfriend has threatened to kill you multiple times and that you are going to leave him. You can either have family members or friends help you leave, or you can have a police escort help you get your stuff and you out of the house. Women are far more likely to be murdered by intimate partners than by anyone else. And of those, most are murdered when trying to leave. Be careful. Also, I bet your GAD will get a lot better once you're not constantly living in fear, having all your communication monitored, and worrying about whether your boyfriend is in the kind of mood where he's breaking windows in the house. Your GAD is your intuition screaming at you right now. Adds an edit to her post. Okay, I'm sorry I haven't posted. I've read your comments, mostly, and they didn't do anything to get rid of my fears. Just know that I've got the flu, I'm in the hospital, and so I'm safe, but miserable, lol, and seriously reconsidering my life choices. I'll try to respond properly when I can. I'm on mobile, and it sucks. Update 8 days later. The last few days have been very hard overall. I haven't gotten much sleep. I was way too busy driving and moving and planning and running and making life decisions and crying and pretending to be normal. My worldly possessions have been reduced to what I could stuff into my old cross-country duffel bag. My dogs are traumatized to the point that one of them is now fear-biting and cries whenever I'm not in direct contact with her, and the other is expelling toxic waste out of both ends. And I'm simply no longer recognizable as the person I was, physically and mentally. Never in a million years did I think I'd end up in this place. Everything was pulled right out from under me, and it's like I woke up in someone else's effed up life. But I'm alive, and that cancels out any of my irrelevant complaints. Last week, I got back from the hospital after a really nasty stomach bug, which I thought was the flu. I collapsed on the couch to sweat it out. I was in a lot of pain, but I still dragged myself to the store to get ginger ale and sports drinks because I didn't want to ask George to do it for me. I realized I needed to appease him however I could until I could figure out a plan, because the Reddit responses scared me and I decided I needed to get away. As soon as I got home, George poured me a glass of orange juice and told me to drink until I threw up. I explained the doctor's orders, but he insisted that enough orange juice would make me throw up or give me diarrhea and that would flush my system and get the toxins out. As unpleasant as throwing up, again, sounded, because I was really dizzy and weak, I decided to try the orange juice. All it did was burn my scratched-up throat and it didn't help settle my stomach, so I stopped drinking it and started drinking ginger ale. He got seriously annoyed by that and kept insisting I drink the orange juice. I told him that it burned my throat, and he said, "Well, your throat's just gonna burn anyways." No idea what that meant. He then asked me where my phone was. Apparently, he wanted to put on some music. I had no idea where it was, but as he started a full-on investigation for it, I remembered I'd had my r/relationships post open on Reddit at the hospital, but I had a mild fever and I couldn't remember whether or not I had closed it. A few people warned me what might happen if he saw my post, and all those warnings jumped right to the front of my mind. I've been in some pretty intense situations before, but I've never felt anything like the pure, unadulterated terror of lying there waiting to see if my psycho boyfriend would find my phone and find out what I'd written. I thought about trying to find it before he got to it or casually trying to discourage him from looking, but I knew he'd be suspicious if I suddenly jumped up at the mention of my phone. In fact, I realized that if I reacted at all, he'd be suspicious enough to probably search until he found something incriminating, and it didn't matter how well I covered my tracks, eventually, he'd settle for something to be mad about. So I had to just lie there, pretending not to panic as he dug through my purse, my backpack, my car, twice. Finally, he called my phone and there wasn't any ring, and I remembered I'd put it on vibrate in the doctor's office. I thought I was saved for about 5 seconds, but then he went and turned off the noisy air purifier, so there was absolute silence, and called again, and I could hear my phone vibrating. He found it in my jacket pocket, and I swear to God I've never seen anything more beautiful than my tiny blank home screen reflected in his glasses. He put on music and shut himself in the computer room. After an hour or so, I passed out. When I woke up, it was still nighttime, and he was sitting across from me drinking a beer, and the first thing he said was that apparently his parents were giving away all his childhood things. I guess he called home while I was asleep. I told him I was sorry to hear that. I could see he was in a really bad mood, but I was ill enough and scared enough that I didn't care at that moment. I just wanted to go back to sleep. He told me again to drink the orange juice. I explained again about how it burned and didn't help my stomach like the ginger ale, and he said something like, "Sometimes I think people refuse to do things purposefully because I ask them to. Like maybe I should just tell people to do the opposite of what I want, so they'll actually do something good for themselves. And I really am scared of him because I don't know what he's going to do to me." So I drank the effing orange juice, and I tried to throw up, and that was the absolute worst pain I've experienced in a long time. It felt like someone stabbed me in the sternum. I actually cried a little and got one of those mini blackouts you get when you sit up too fast in the morning. George was standing there while I retched in the tub, and at one point, he did put his hand on my shoulder and ask if I was okay, but he didn't stick around and wait for me to regain my composure. He left the bathroom, and when I found him again, he was on the computer watching YouTube videos. He didn't say anything to me the rest of that night, and when I told him good night, he didn't respond. I decide I'm going to wake up early and go straight to my therapist. I never want to feel that fear or helplessness again, over anything, least of all whether or not I closed a stupid app on my phone. As soon as the center is open, I go to my therapist for a crisis walk-in and tell him everything. He confirms that George's behavior is troubling. I say I'm scared and that I need help, and he gets me in touch with a victims of domestic violence thing that's apparently set up by the university. I hate that all of those words now apply to me, and even as I write this, I still don't think they're accurate. I don't feel like a victim of domestic violence. But I guess I am. The next 24 hours after I approached my therapist were the most painful, barring Monday, when I had to give up my dogs. The police were called, and I knew there was absolutely no going back once that happened, because George hated the police and he would never, ever forgive me for telling any of this to my therapist. Believe it or not, I did not want to make life harder for George. I have spent so much of the past 4-ish years doing everything to make his life easier. I did not want to hurt or punish him. All I wanted was to get away with as little impact as possible, to vanish completely, and go zero contact, to forget everything and not deal with it. So the last thing I wanted was police involvement because of the stupendous freakout it would cause, but the domestic violence victims thing worked in tandem with law enforcement, and I recognized that I wasn't thinking clearly. So I took a huge leap of faith and actually trusted a trained professional to do his job properly. I was really surprised when a kind-faced woman in a pink blouse stepped into my therapist's office 20 minutes later, introduced herself as a domestic victim advocate, listened sympathetically and non-judgmentally to my sob story, and proceeded to escort me everywhere for the next few hours. She had a gun on her belt, and she was an actual trained cop, so I felt as safe as someone like me could feel, considering what I was doing. The kindness my advocate showed me was so far beyond anything any stranger has ever expressed toward me in my life. She gave me a chocolate bar off her desk that she'd obviously bought for herself earlier, offered me her lunch, packed me a to-go bag with water bottles and a can of dog food for my puppies, and told me sincerely that she wished there was anything she could say to comfort me when she and 3 other officers walked with me into my and George's apartment for the last time. I just told her that I understood. Nothing could really be said because it just sucked, but I was glad she was there. I threw clothes, a few pictures, some papers, my travel toothbrush, and my phone charger into a bag and pretty much sobbed more hysterically than I thought any sane person could ever sob. It was very embarrassing, but I couldn't stop. To an outsider with a normally functioning brain who can't understand exactly what it's like to be in my shoes, I probably seemed really weak and pathetic and stupid. But to me, getting out didn't necessarily feel like a good thing, it felt like a disaster. I was ransacking my own home. George was everything to me, and everything in my body was saying that I was destroying the only real love I'd ever have and betraying my best friend for no reason, especially when I saw a note on the fridge he'd left for me with a dry erase marker: "Dogs pooped this morning. They'd both been fed and Pook's got her medication. Have a great day, honey, I love you." I really wish I'd packed smarter. Who the F forgets to pack socks? But there were 3 large, intimidating cops waiting for me in my living room, and the victim advocate lady warned me to hurry because we didn't want George to show up and see this. It was very distressing. I had to leave behind so many things. I know it's all just worthless junk, but it was my home, things I'd picked specially and had for years. The gaming PC I built myself, my dog's toys, my sprouting plants that were so close to blooming, my favorite sunflower pattern dishes, the beautiful wooden bookcase my father made for me in his woodshop when I graduated high school, my old gross dog-eared Harry Potter books, some of which I've had since I was a little kid, the polka dot comforter my sister handed down to me after she got married, my old birthday and Christmas cards. That stuff made me feel like a person with a life that mattered. But it wouldn't fit in my bag, so I had to leave it. And I don't think I'm going to see it again. But it's not the end of the world. I'll go on and hoard a lot more useless junk in the future. If I had stayed, I wouldn't have been able to, and my junk wouldn't have done my body any good. The dogs were not happy about all the strangers in the house, nor my apparent mental breakdown, and they immediately started losing their minds. I somehow managed to load them and my stuff into my car, and then it was back to the police station to discuss options. I'd put off calling my family because I didn't want this to be real, but I figured once George realized some of my crap was gone, it was going to get very real whether or not I felt ready. The call wasn't bad. I've always been able to tell my dad anything and not be judged or ignored, though I hadn't talked with him for a while. He and my mom were away on a camping trip, but when I told him things were bad and I didn't feel safe, no other details were mentioned. He invited me to join them. It was many hundreds of miles away, in the middle of nowhere, but that sounded perfect just then. Nobody could find me, I'd be totally safe, at least for a few days. So I left town. About 3 hours into my 8-hour drive, the calls and texts started coming. I'd asked the advocate lady what I was supposed to do when George tried to get in touch with me, because for him, this is completely out of nowhere and he's likely going to call the police and file a missing person report if I didn't come home that night. She gave me a few cookie-cutter sentences to give him, which I put into a brief text. It essentially said that I didn't feel safe right now, I wanted space, and I didn't want him to contact me again. I would contact him when I was ready. Then I was stupid and I read the hailstorm of sad texts I got in response to that. Then I was even more stupid and, rather than blocking him, I answered one of his many subsequent calls. It was quick. He sounded scared and heartbroken, and I felt bad for him, because I knew he would never understand. He said he was having a panic attack, he didn't understand, please don't do this, all I ever did was love and take care of you, we were supposed to get engaged. I cut him off and said that I didn't feel safe, I didn't want him to contact me, I couldn't help him, his behavior was unstable, and he needed to go to a hospital. He asked me if this had anything to do with my therapist telling me lies. I said no, but he said something like, I need to talk to that effing guy, he needs to stay the F out of my relationship, he's messing with my fiancé. Then he asked me if I'd stop taking my anti-anxiety medication. But I didn't answer, and I didn't hear the rest of what he was saying because I just repeated to him, firmly, all the points I'd already stated, and then hung up and blocked him. I then called my therapist to let him know that he might be in danger. The police got involved again, and when George made a threatening call to the center 5 minutes later, the whole place was put on lockdown. I'm not sure exactly what happened or what he said, but I think my therapist had to have a cop escort him home, and George was told not to contact me or the center unless he wanted to be arrested. So I endangered a whole building full of wonderful people who have only ever helped me and deprived others of their therapy sessions that day. What if somebody else had been in crisis and needed help? Just one more thing I can think about when I'm falling asleep at night. My parents aren't touchy-feely, but my dad let me hug him and cry on his shoulder for about 30 seconds and then cheerfully pretended like nothing was wrong. He wiped my laptop and phone in case of keyloggers while joking around with me about the dogs and school and unrelated stuff, which is his way of dealing with problems. To be fair, it works really well most of the time. He doesn't like talking about personal issues, in general, it makes him uncomfortable, so I spared him a conversation about what happened. He knew I was safe and getting help, and that's all he wanted. My mom was extremely sympathetic toward George. She's always liked him, and she told me once that he made me normal, and when I mentioned once that I thought he was controlling, she said that I still shouldn't push him away because he was really nice and good for me, and controlling behavior wasn't in itself an issue anyway. I hadn't expected much from her, to be honest. This was the woman who'd abandoned me in parked cars and her friends' empty houses so she could go to work, which she very obviously loves more than her family, to the point of being extremely unhealthy. My dad was at the time working all night and sleeping during the day and only changed jobs when I was in my early teens. Also from her came such gems as, tampons are for bad non-virgin girls. Note, my mother is a rabid atheist, so what the F, and writing is a hobby, not a job, don't waste your time studying that, and I've never been surprised that your sister has more friends than you. To my sister, she always said I was prettier and skinnier, so nobody won. She grew up in a severely impoverished third world country, orphaned at 10, and spent most of her adolescence and early 20s married to a Hell's Angel who tried to stab her when she finally left, so there are huge cultural, lingual, and emotional gaps between us. I love and appreciate her, but I generally try not to take her advice. Still, I was really hurt by the whole conversation. She kept mentioning how smart and kind George was, asking for a blow-by-blow account of what really happened, suggesting that I got it wrong, trying to puzzle through his delusions, wishing she could help him, feeling sorry for him, and wondering if she could talk to him. Maybe convince him to go to a hospital. I explained over and over that we couldn't help because he didn't believe there was a problem, and even if he did go into treatment, I wasn't going to risk going back. She really wanted me to stick with him and support him through these troubling times. To me in my situation, she said, I'm glad you weren't killed. Literally, that's it. I had to get back to my life. I was warned the place they were putting me didn't allow pets. My parents were busy and couldn't take my dogs, so I ended up having to think about whether or not I could afford to kennel them until graduation, or if it would be easier on them if I found them new homes. I'm selfish enough that I didn't entertain rehoming them for long. I did not want to lose my dogs. I could lose everything else, but if I lost them, I'd die. They were my babies. They used to sleep in my bed before George kicked them out, and they were the only ones I could cuddle and cry on during this whole nightmare. They were my strongest emotional support. So I swallowed my pride and called Sarah, a friend I've known for a couple of years now. I haven't kept up contact all that well because with George, it's just easier to have as few relationships as possible to avoid anyone texting me too often or mentioning anything that he could be suspicious about. She was glad to hear from me. I asked if she knew anyone who could take my dogs for a day or two until I figured out where to keep them. She called a friend of hers who agreed to take them. Then she asked if everything was okay. I thought about lying, but I figured I owed her the truth, or at least a part of it. I said things were really up in the air right now and I'd have to fill her in later. My roommate got almost no notice that somebody was going to be moving in. My advocate moved really quickly and wanted me out of my situation ASAP, so by the time my roommate knew, I'd already unloaded all of my garbage in her personal space. I taped a Butterfinger and a friendly little note to her bedroom door, and I fully intend to bribe her not to be pissed later by leaving booze in the fridge and letting her know she's welcome to it. She's out of town herself right now, so I haven't met her yet, but she seems nice. I saw Game of Thrones magnets on the fridge, so there's one icebreaker I've got. I then changed a few more things to make myself feel safer walking around in the streets. There's no chance George knows where I am or how to find me, but still. I hope this stun gun doesn't go off randomly in my pocket. I managed to find a kennel I felt comfortable with. They had grassy playpens with shallow swimming pools and fountains, and they provided the dogs with enrichment and fluffy beds. I absolutely kid you not, this place looks better than some daycares I've seen. It was astronomically expensive, but I figured if I was going to use up my rainy day fund on something, it should be something that would reduce the amount of lifelong trauma my dogs were experiencing. When I went to check my dogs into their temporary new home, I found out that the girl Sarah referred me to had to get up in the middle of the night to take one of them out several times. Vomit and diarrhea everywhere. Which made me feel horrible. I forced $30 on her and arranged to have flowers sent over as a sincere apology for the hell I put her through. Then I gave up my dogs. I can still see them during the day, but it broke my heart into pieces to let them go. Sarah met up with me later, and I told her what happened. Like my parents, she really isn't touchy-feely, so there was no crying or hugging or any of that nonsense. She gave me crap for being with George. Dude, I knew he was a psycho. I was gonna tell you off before because you were always crying about him and stuff, but I figured you were a grown woman and had your crap together, damn, and then went on to say that I should have called her way earlier. She liked the changes I'd made to my appearance so far but said I should avoid wearing bright colors from now on. She takes off her dark-colored jacket and gives it to me right there. Then she goes on to describe all the ways my situation was exactly like J-Lo's in the 2002 movie Enough, reads me the whole synopsis off Wikipedia, and makes plans for us to get smashed and watch it together. I told her I've decided to avoid alcohol for the near future since I'm already dancing on the edge of depression, but I said I'd still show up and bring popcorn balls. Other than how annoyed she was at me over my bad decisions, I couldn't have asked for a better friend. For a little while at least, she made me feel human. Later that night, my dad informed me that George had left him and my mother a threatening message on their public business line. The only way I can think that he got that number was by Googling their names. I immediately took the necessary steps to file for a restraining order. The only reason I'm writing this is because I have no idea how to make sense of my life right now except to write it down, and more importantly, I've really got nobody else to talk to. When I was a kid, I'd do a lot of journaling to help me get through difficult times. I figure this is the same, only sometimes the journal says encouraging things back. And I'm not going to lie, I could use some encouragement. So I'm just going to dump it all anonymously here, and maybe that will give me some kind of closure, maybe not. I have nothing else to do because I can't bear to leave this room right now. Also, I feel I owe it to a bunch of internet strangers to say thank you properly and let you know what's happened. Some of you seem truly upset by my situation, and some took quite a large chunk of their time to write to me. So thank you, really, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Because I'm a real girl behind these words. I like sewing my own dresses and watching David Attenborough documentaries and wasting hours of my life on PC games. I like gardening and fantasy books. I struggled through serious depression and GAD and eating disorders that left me very weak but very grateful for my life, so I believed. I am a real, breathing person who was very naive and very vulnerable, and you random people saved my life. Honestly, I only ever come on here to look at screenshots of elderly people struggling to use Facebook. I thought the internet was full of Machiavellian teenagers who'd probably tell me how beachy I sounded. Thanks, genuinely, to everyone who answered my post and everyone who sent me a PM. I've sat and I've read each and every one of them multiple times. I reread them when I start to feel like I've overreacted, like maybe I'm crazy. I reread them when I start to think about ever reconciling with George or feeling guilty about what I've done. I've printed out my original post and every comment I've gotten, yes, even you in danger, girl, and I put them in my journal and I continue to look at them. Even though none of you guys actually knew me, you cared. And some of you cared quite a lot. You offered me your stories, or someone to talk to, or a place to stay, a book, a phone number to call. Most of you were more concerned about me than my mother. Because I was seriously in danger. I was? There were things I never thought would be affected by my being with George, my dogs, my possessions, the safety of the people around me. I was lonely enough to get myself into that position. And I actually do want to live, so I realize I've got to change, too. There's a lot of work to be done. Maybe George isn't an evil guy, but I'm going to stop describing him as a wonderful person. I don't believe people are good or evil, but the stuff he was doing was definitely evil. The more I look back on it, the more I realize how much stuff I let happen to my life and body that I should not have tolerated. And the absolute crapest I've endured has made me slowly start to admit that to myself. I can't explain my reasons for staying with him so long because they aren't logical. He spent years slowly building up to some of the things he did, and it was easy to forgive him after every seemingly small incident because I didn't look at the big picture, and I thought I was in love. George is a highly intelligent, gorgeous, funny, inspiring, ambitious, and charming man, the kind of man I fully believed was way out of my league. He is often very thoughtful, and we clicked on a level I'd never experienced before. He does charity work in the community, has created methods for improving the world in concrete ways both environmentally and socially, mostly concerning the homeless because he was homeless for a while, and he would bend over backwards to help a friend in need. The sex was amazing when I wanted it. On the surface, he was perfect. Being with him often gave me butterflies. But he is sick. And he's sick in a way that I can't fix. Over the years, I lost the ability to understand what was okay and what wasn't. I fought along the way, I even occasionally left, but he always drew me back in. He made me feel special and loved. He said I was an irreplaceable extension of himself, and for a girl who'd never thought of herself as irreplaceable, it seemed to make up for all the bad. I've since learned that this kind of stuff is common. I'm going to try my hardest to educate myself and change how I approach relationships, because I now understand that I'm just as sick as George, although in a different way, and if I don't do anything about it, I'll likely end up with another George somewhere down the road. I've ordered the following books, and I intend to read them and to continue therapy so that this never happens to me again. Why does he do that? Lundy Bancroft. The Gift of Fear, Gavin de Becker. Safe People, Dr. Henry Cloud, Dr. John Townsend. The Science of Trust, John M. Gottman. Daring Greatly, Brené Brown. These are just a few that were suggested to me, by you and my therapist. If you have other suggestions that have helped you, or someone you know, through a situation like mine, please let me know. In the past few days, I felt a huge upwelling of pure gratefulness for being alive. There are still a lot of things I need to deal with, but I've got a lot of support moving forward, along with a victim advocate. My university provides free legal counsel. So I think I'm going to be okay. Pookie the dog feelings update. Alright, guys, check your spelling because all this crap's going in the scrapbook. You think I'm kidding? You see if I'm kidding. I love you guys, and it's seriously like this in here for me reading your responses. I've just started pelting people with upvotes in lieu of 1,000 thank yous because I really am so grateful for your encouragement and your kind words. This has made my life. Also, a few people have mentioned the possibility of poison, so I thought I'd let you know I'm going to the docs tomorrow to see if there's any chance of that. But I'm stable, I think, and there's no evidence of damage thus far. Hopefully, the orange juice thing was just a weird power play and not something more sinister.